Everyone, it's Kristen. So this is going to be a short video because I'm not really talking about like a specific comic book storyline or anything. I just kind of wanted to talk about talk about Gambit in X-Men 97. I mean, everyone knows that my favorite character is Rogue, and I feel like you can't have Rogue without Gambit. And just like I'm so glad that they kind of have their happily ever after now that, in the comic books they're married and stuff because it's been a long road for them and I mean they've had such a rocky relationship that I'm happy that they have, they're happily ever after, so to speak. um but what they've done in X-Men 97, I'm just like, what? The whole Magneto love triangle thing, and then her not telling Gambit like how she feels, even though she ultimately picked him, and then him dying basically without knowing. Oh man, that still gets me. So what I want to talk about is I know Gambit is not gonna stay dead. Like there's season 2 and they're working on season 3. There's no way he would keep him dead for another, for the whole series basically, because he's honestly too popular of a character for them to just kill off and then just not have come back. So what I want to talk today today is how he might come back. I don't know. I mean, okay. This week's episode is called Bright Eyes, and that, is a nod to Cable because Rogue called him, remember me, Bright Eyes, right before she punched him out in the original animated series. So I know it's going to be like Cable's going to be in there somewhere, and we saw him in episode 5. But I mean, so one of the options is he fixes it. Like he fixes the timeline. Everyone saved, Gambit saved, etc. Or another option, because people are saying we saw the Watcher in the sky, which they appear at fixed points. Although that doesn't mean the Watcher has never interfered. Like in the comic books, he's helped the Fantastic Four multiple times. And when the Celestials scanned his mind, like the Watcher that we know the most of, like it says that he's changed events like 400 times. So he doesn't never interfere, but he usually doesn't. And also, I think they threw that in there as a nod to season 3. Storm's supposedly going to be in it. And, what if Storm had the powers of Thor? Although, technically, she's had the powers of Thor in the comics. I did a video on that. It was New Mutants and X-Men versus Loki. You'd have to scroll down there quite a ways because that was pretty far back. But so I don't know if that's actually considered like a what if or not. I mean, if they want to go with it, then okay. But it's still cool to have, the X-Men in what if. But anyway, so all that to say is I feel like they're leaning more towards, of course, because in the comic books, Genosha was destroyed. So I feel like they're leaning more towards, yes, Genosha has been destroyed. Cable comes back, tries to fix it. He can fix like details of it, change details of it, but he can't fix the whole thing. Like since we're talking about the animated series, in the animated series, Apocalypse created a plague, and in order for his people to survive, the plague had to happen. Which, of course, he didn't want to help Apocalypse, but then he realized, okay, I can still let the plague happen, but if Wolverine gets infected, then he has the antibodies needed to save everyone, because that's why the plague needed to happen, because so his future and his people had the antibodies to fight that plague. So he still let it happen, but he changed it. So I feel like that's possible, that he could go back in time and try to change some of the events that happened on Genosha, like save more people. I really don't think they're going to undo it, because that would basically, like, they set up Gambit, this whole heroic sacrifice, and so if they went back and undid it, then that would just negate his sacrifice. And then I feel like they wouldn't do that for his characterization. I feel like they're going to leave that in there. So the other option, even though I don't like this option at all, I really, really don't, is that he comes back as Death. Like, the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse Death. That was 2007 when he did, during this storyline. So Apocalypse comes into town. This is when, after M Day, when Scarlet Witch said no more mutants, and there was only 198 mutants in the world. And so Apocalypse comes back and says, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help the mutants. And Gambit goes to him and says, in X-Men 183, and says, I believe you. I'm here to basically join you. And Apocalypse's plan is to basically cull all but 10% of the human population from the world. So he wants to get rid of 90% of the human race. So Gambit goes to him and says, hey, I believe you. But then, and Apocalypse makes him Death. Like I said, I don't like Gambit as Death, but this is not the first time an X-Men has been Death. Of course, most famous is Archangel, and then Wolverine. And I think that was in 2000. And of course, Archangel, that was like 1988, X Factor 24, I believe. So anyway, it gives you this little backstory onto why Gambit is, agreed to be Death. And he basically says, like, I'm doing this because I love the X-Men. Because if you are, here, if you're scheming, or anything, like, go back on your word. Like, I can stop you. Like, I'm here to stop you. So, like I said, I don't like him as Death, but it's a possibility. I mean, because Apocalypse is very powerful. He gave Angel back his wings. He actually, like, Sunfire had his legs ripped off by Lady Deathstrike, and he gave him back his legs, made him whole again. So, like, he's powerful. He can do a lot. So, and it's interesting because Gambit didn't want any of the drugs or the pain medication, because he wanted to be awake the entire time to know what he was doing to, know what Apocalypse was doing to him. And so, in, like, X-Men 185, he says, yes, I'm Death, but I'm Gambit. A part of me still loves Rogue. And he's like, Apocalypse is like, that's impossible. You're Death. You can't love. But then we see Sunfire and Gambit. They come for Polaris, because she was transformed into Famine by Apocalypse. And so they feel like they're all the same. Like, because Sunfire was transformed by Apocalypse as well. So they feel like they're all the same. Like, that they need to stick together. And here, Gambit tries to kill Rogue, and Rogue's like, but you love me. And he's like, that's why I have to kill you, because you're my greatest attachment to my old self. So, they leave Sunfire and Gambit because they're losing the battle, and Polaris says, I'm not going to go with you. And then what happens is they go to visit an old friend, so to speak, for help. And then in X-Men 200, you see Gambit is back to his old self physically. and he said, I got help from an old friend. And so what he, so basically because Sinister helped him, he had to work for Sinister as part of the Marauders for a while. But he made sure, like he was also there to make sure that they didn't do anything, really terrible, like kill any of the X-Men. So the third option is Sinister, that he clones Gambit. Because of course we know he can, because he cloned Jean and made Maddie. And actually, in an alternate Earth reality, Gambit is a Sinister clone, and he also Sinister mixed a little bit of Cyclops' DNA in him, in hopes to gain Cyclops' powers. And we also and I was just going across or flipping through, and I see that basically Sinister, he has a lab where he has pretty much all mutants' DNA that he could want. Although in season 5, the Phalanx, two-parter, he said that my lab was destroyed and all its contents, but I feel like I'm pretty confident that he could get, get another DNA sample, find another lab, a place to work. So that's option 3. Option 4, I only bring this up because they've introduced the Watcher and they've introduced the Adversary. So I feel like it's possible for them to introduce other Celestials. And so I just did a video on this series, but during Fall of the Mutants, the X-Men died, and Roma, a Celestial, she brought them all back to life because of their sacrifice. And, that's what, because their sacrifice used to seal the Adversary away. So I feel like a benevolent Celestial or being could look at Gambit like that. Like he sacrificed himself to save others, so he deserves a reward, so to speak, in order to come back to life. So I feel like that's where we're at. I mean, if you can think of any other ideas, let me know. So one, he doesn't come back at all during these last 4 episodes, but comes back. And if he does come back during this season, that would be Cable, time travel, which like I said, I feel more like he's not going to, because that would, they built up this huge heroic sacrifice, his moment. And I feel like if they had Cable bring him back, even though I really, really, really want him to, then that would just negate that sacrifice and he wouldn't have his heroic moment. So I don't feel like that's going to happen. So it's either he comes back as Death when Apocalypse comes around, because even though Apocalypse is not, well, okay, we saw him last in the animated series in the 5th Horseman episode, where he supposedly took over Fabian Cortez's body. I mean, it looked like it to me, but some people are saying, well, we don't know that for sure. But I'm pretty sure Apocalypse is still around. I feel like you can't really get rid of him, especially since we saw that clip. So he's definitely a possibility to bring back. And then Sinister, the whole clone thing, it's funny because Gambit was rumored to be the long-lost third Summers brother, but then everyone figured it out pretty quickly. So the writers changed that and didn't go with that storyline. And then it turned out to, much years and years and years later, it turned out to be Vulcan, who we saw in episode 6. There was a cameo of him. So I feel like that might be a storyline in the future too. It's very possible, the Empire storyline. So we'll see. I don't know, but so those are, and then like I said, a Celestial brings them back to life. I don't know. I hope it's a Celestial, just because I don't want him to be a clone, even though, I mean, Maddie's a clone and it's okay. But I don't want him to come back as Death. I mean, that's just so, messy, and yeah, I really didn't like him as Death. I mean, no. So, Anyway, if you can think of anything else, like any other way they can bring him back, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about my options that I presented and which one you think is actually going to happen. And I hope you join me in the future for more videos. And until then, bye.